Welcome to Mental Health First Aid. We have an interesting show for you today. It's something that I became very interested in. As a police officer for 30 years, I'd never heard of this organization. And I got to tell you, I'm somewhat embarrassed that I didn't. So I'm really making it part of my crusade is to get this information out for people and they know what it is. It is called NAMI. And we have Mary Dalton here from the DuPage NAMI, and she's going to explain in great detail of what it is and how they can help you. Mary, thank you so much for being on the show.
Thank you for having me.
What are we talking about with NAMI? What is it?
NAMI is the National Alliance on Mental Illness. It's the nation's largest grassroots mental health organization, and we are not mental health professionals. We are people with a lived experience. So we are people who have someone with mental illness in our families, or we ourselves have a mental health diagnosis.
Right. So we say national. And we were talking before, it sounds like maybe international now.
It actually is kind of international. We're in all 50 states. We're in Puerto Rico. There are several affiliates in Canada, as well as in Italy and in India.
All right. So it's getting out all over.
It's getting
and
out.
I tell you, I am embarrassed that not knowing what NAMI was, because it could have helped me so much as a police officer.
Right.
Because your main goal is referrals, to give information to people.
Yeah.
How did NAMI start?
NAMI started 30-some years ago with two moms who had adult children with schizophrenia. And back then, they just could not find any information. They couldn't find any support. And so they just started to get together, and then they found other people who needed the same types of things, and that's how it all started.
And a big problem, I think also, and we still see this problem, is the stigma involved with mental illness.
Huge stigma.
Yeah, but people don't want to talk about it, keep in the shadows, keep in the dark holes, don't bring it up. And this NAMI's to bring it out in the open.
NAMI is all about getting rid of the stigma, you know, and that recovery is possible, and that people need to be educated, and people need to find support. And stigma keeps people from getting treatment, and we know that treatment works.
So how did you, I mean, your background, is it counseling? Or?
No, not at all.
So you're not a clinician?
No, we are not clinicians. I am an individual, and mental illness has touched our family. And so I wish I had known about NAMI 20-some years ago as well. That would have helped our family quite a bit. Right.
So when we talk about how can they help, how can NAMI help? I mean, you have different organizations. It's the same organization, different locations.
Right.
So you're DuPage, and then there's a Kendall Kane?
There's 30 affiliates in Illinois, a couple more are probably about to start. So there's NAMIs all over the place, and wherever anybody lives, they can go to NAMI.org and click on Illinois, and all the affiliates will drop down. And you
Are they
can find
usually
one.
by county? Or?
It's somewhat county-wide, where there's DuPage, there's NAMI DKK, DeKalb, Kane South, and Kendall.
And Kendall. And that's the one that's for our area.
In Aurora.
In this area. But Aurora, that's why I think, and not to give anything, you know, to hurt them or in any way, but I didn't hear about it, I think, because they're more strategized towards Kane County, I think.
Well, and it's a smaller affiliate. So NAMI DuPage is the largest, but there are very active affiliates all over the state. But some of them are small, some of them are still, you know, just volunteers, people working out of their houses, but very motivated volunteers because they found the help they needed and they want to get other people help.
So the workers, there are paid individuals that work for NAMI that help organize and get the programs going and everything together.
Some affiliates do have paid people. We do have staff. Other affiliates, they're doing it as volunteers.
Right. And then fundraising, I mean, how is it paid for?
Well, that's a good question. Our state affiliate does get some state money. However, the local affiliates have to raise all of their money. So that's done through fundraisers. It's done through writing grants.
So individually,
and individual donations.
Wow,
So each affiliate is responsible for raising their own money.
But I could see where this would work, and the individual end of it. If you're having some issues with family, or man, you're just crying out for any kind of help you can get, because there is such an embarrassment. There's a stigma involved, like we talked about earlier, and there's just issues that you don't want to discuss. So if you have somewhere where you can go to talk about these things, to get your head on straight, to figure out what's going on, then you can help the person.
Well, that's the thing. I mean, and NAMI, everybody at NAMI has been there. We've all been there, either with a family member or with ourselves. So anyone who calls NAMI and finds information about our support groups or our education classes is going to know that the people who lead those support groups are people who either have the illness, have an illness, or are a family member, and someone who leads our education group is going to be an individual with a mental health diagnosis or a family member. So I always say that you always need those professionals, but yet if I had cancer or something and really wanted to, I'd want to talk to somebody who had cancer and had been treated and gotten better.
Absolutely.
So that's what we're
How does NAMI fit into mental health first aid? Or how doesn't it, I should say, you know, because it's like
NAMI is one of the best community resources there is, you know, and like you said, a lot of people don't know about it. I think it's almost like a best kept secret some places. And so when we learned about mental health first aid and became involved through this consortium with Linden Oaks, it's a perfect partnership because myself as an instructor, you know, I can tell people about NAMI. That's a good way to get the name out. It's helped. We've trained our staff and our board and some of our volunteers, and so it's great because we are all about getting information out there, reducing stigma, you know, getting people help.
And that's one of the reasons why I wanted to bring you on the show, is because you're an instructor and you work for NAMI. So you're an instructor for mental health first aid and working for NAMI. You're, like you said, you're able to get that information out there. But as the community liaison for mental health first aid, I get to see all the instructors. I get to see all the instructors working and stuff, and I got to tell you, you could hear pin drop when you talk about some of the things that NAMI does, how they help, what's going on with it, because people are so interested. They don't know where to go or how to handle it, you know. And it's just, you're a phenomenal teacher, instructor, teaching mental health first aid, which really helps the whole program. You know, it makes it go even better and further. So we have so much to talk about with the different entities. When we talked about, there's 5 different breakouts that we discuss. We discussed this depression and anxiety, psychosis, eating disorder, and chemical dependency. And each one of those things can tie into NAMI, can't they?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, everyone that, we have support groups and we have education classes. And in the education classes, and maybe we'll bring those up later in more detail, but people will learn about all of those illnesses. And then anyone who is suffering from any of those, in those areas, can find help at one of our support groups. Right.
And when we go through this, when you go through it and you start, and the first thing I think we do now, I think we do this more because Google's out here. You know, you can internet things, you can research things, and get a real understanding of what's going on. And you don't know what you're getting totally from Google. You know what I mean? If it's inaccurate, if it's this, is that true? And when you go to NAMI, you've got some real good references.
It's a real trusted source.
You can see and understand and know what's going on with it. I tell you what, let's take a little break here. And when we come back, what we want to do is we're going to go step by step and see what we're looking at for specifically if there's an issue going on with the family, what you can do and how NAMI can help. We'll see in a little bit.
Big dreams and good grades aren't enough to get into college. There are actual steps you need to take. Finding someone who can help is the first and most important. For the next steps, go to knowhowtogo.org.
It begins innocently enough. You don't return a phone call. You break a date at the last minute. But in fact, it's the beginning of a pattern. And soon, your friend with mental illness realizes you're avoiding them. But what if you knew that your friendship was the key to their recovery? Would you still lock them out of your life?
Mom!
What?
You can't find Ichabod.
What?
You don't have to be perfect to be a perfect parent. There are thousands of teens in foster care who would love to put up with you.
Real men know that getting tested is the way to take care of their families.
That's why real men wear gowns. For a list of the tests you need, go to ahrq.gov.
Welcome back to Mental Health First Aid. We're here talking to Mary Dalton from NAMI, in fact DuPage NAMI, and we're discussing about specifically how this program can help, or the different programs they have, how it can help individuals and people who need the help, or family members that are looking for help. As a police officer dealing with domestics, lots of domestics and issues, going back to the same household time after time, and having one of the people that are involved with alcohol or drugs, and the other spouse not having know how to deal with it. They just, I don't know what to do, I don't know how to handle this. And you know what I'd tell them is, go to Al-Anon. Go to Al-Anon, get your head on straight before you need to make decisions for other things. And once you get it figured out, then you can make proper decisions. Mary, is that what we're talking about basically with NAMI too?
Yeah, NAMI is all about offering support and education to family members as well as individuals with a mental health diagnosis.
Let's look at it step by step. Okay, with family members, we got father, mother who has a son who is having some issues, hearing some voices, very scared about what to do, embarrassed about, oh my gosh, what's going, end of the world, you know, type of thing. The son's having some issues, they're guessing that's what's happening, they don't know for sure. They start doing some research, they find NAMI. They call you, what happens?
Well, we have a resource specialist who would answer the phone and listen to them, and a lot of times parents or family members just need to get it all out, you know. They don't know what's going on, they're very frustrated, and that's a normal response.
For the person who's going through it and the family members who are watching.
Absolutely, yeah. And so we are not mental health professionals, but we would obviously, if they felt that something was going on with a family member, encourage them to try to get that family member professional help. But also then where we come in is we know what it's like to have a family member who's going through something like this.
You've walked the walk. You just don't talk it.
We've walked the walk, exactly. So we would obviously want them to get involved in one of our support groups for themselves. We also have support groups for, say, their son or daughter who's going through something. So we know that there are predictable stages of response. And, you know, when something like this happens, it doesn't happen to just that one person, it happens to the whole family. You know, it really changes a lot of dynamics and that sort of thing in the family. So we know that when something first happens, maybe a diagnosis is first given or something, the family can really be in a crisis. And that's when we really suggest a support group, because they can be with other people who are going through the same thing.
Right.
And
it'd mean much more to them.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. And everything that we offer is free. Everything that NAMI offers anywhere is free. And there are no boundary lines. So if someone were to live in Will County and want to go to something in NAMI DuPage, that would be perfectly okay, and vice versa. And everything at NAMI is peer-led. So all of our support groups are led by family members, our family support groups led by family members who have been trained to lead support groups. Our support groups for the individual with a diagnosis are led by people with diagnoses who have been trained. So everything is peer-led. We've all been there. We're walking the same walk.
So is there a curriculum that they follow when they do this program, or is it just where you say, okay, we need to discuss this, we need to talk about it, and we'll go from there? Or is there a regular curriculum that you follow?
No, that's a great question. And I would say we'd have to separate out the support as well as the education. So NAMI's mission is support and education and advocacy to improve the lives of individuals with mental health diagnoses and their families. So in that sense, so we have kind of two prongs in terms of support, which are the support groups, and that is a drop-in support group that there is not a curriculum of any kind. It's a support group. Then we have our education classes where there is a curriculum.
And you go through the process and understand that.
So
you know, when you said predictable response, that was interesting. That they have a predictable response. You know, it's almost like, and I've learned this also, that there is a grieving process. There is a regular grieving process. You have to go through these different stages in order to get through that process. It sounds like you're sort of talking the same thing
we talk
here.
about the predictable stages of response for, say, a family member. So maybe their son or daughter has suddenly been diagnosed with depression or is having these problems and has started to get into counseling. You know, they're in crisis, you know, or maybe they've gone into the hospital. They're in crisis. They're hoping against hope that this is going to be a one-time thing, and it's never going to happen again, you know. And they're just thinking, you know, they're trying to come up with any reason other than maybe a mental health diagnosis that this could be happening, because there is so much shame and stigma, you know. So we call that stage 1, and in stage 1 they really need a support group. The next stage is maybe this has been going on a while. Maybe this is a 2nd or 3rd hospitalization, or this has been several years.
Now, we've heard
that they've been dealing with this.
Through mental health first aid, they say that psychosis can be up to a year before they get help. Up to a year.
And there's such a long space sometimes before somebody gets help. And at that point, it's kind of, we call it, it's stage 2. They're going through the mill. And this is where families can get really angry, really resentful, you know. They can start really blaming their loved one, thinking sometimes that maybe this is their choice to act like this because they don't understand. They don't understand the illness and the symptoms. And so in stage 2, there can be anger, there can be resentment, you know, there can be a feeling of like, oh gosh, this is going to be forever. This is never going to get better.
And probably just for these people to see this, and you tell them, hey, this is stage 2. This is textbook.
This
is
textbook. Go, you're at stage 2. That's normal. That's predictable.
How much of a relief would that be, just to know that?
Exactly. And that's where you need to be educated about the illnesses. So that's where we would suggest them going to one of our education groups. Groups. So it's really, it's very true. And a lot of times we find, like, we have some high school programs, and we tell, and we'll do in-services for teachers, and we say, you know what, you may see a parent come in and they're really angry and they're blaming their kid, and you're thinking, oh, no wonder this kid has problems.
If he just ate his vegetables, he'd be okay. You know,
and they start to blame the parent, you know, like, oh, that's why Johnny's having so many problems. No, it's that the parent is in that stage 2 response of, and they don't understand it. They need some education.
Very interesting. What are the parameters? What are your parameters of what illnesses? I mean, is there you only deal with psychosis, you only deal bipolar, you only deal autism, you only what are your
Actually, autism is the one that we do not do because there's specific autism organizations, but no, anyone with any diagnosis, anybody with a family member with any diagnosis can come to any of our
things. It can be depression, it can be anxiety.
So our education programs, like for example, Family to Family, it's a 12-week, 2.5-hour a night course, and it's you'll come out with like a binder like this. It's almost like a college course.
2.5 hours every night. That's a lot of time.
It's a lot of time, but I'm telling you, every family member that's gone through it has literally said it's been life-changing for them, because they learn all about brain biology. They learn about all the different illnesses, all about the medications, self-care, how to take care of themselves, how to communicate with their family member who has an illness, and it takes them from that anger and resentment and, you know, not realizing, not understanding. They start to get some empathy for their family member and say, you know what, it's pretty brave what they're doing. They're trying to live with this illness and get better, and how can I help them? And then also, how can I take care of myself in that situation? Because many times, you know, you lose yourself when you're trying to take care of someone
Fascinating.
else.
Very interesting. When we come back, we're going to discuss more about this, and specifically some of the programs that they have. She mentioned a couple, but there are several more, and we're going to bring those up when we come back.
Everyone has friends. There's online friends, friends to go out with on a Saturday night, friends to hang out with and do nothing, friends who show up on moving day. And then there are the friends who'll be there if someone is dealing with a mental illness. Are you one of those friends?
Whatever we deny Underneath everything we are, underneath everything we do, we are all people, connected, interdependent, united. And when we reach out a hand to one, we can influence the condition of all. That's what it means to live united.
I remember how much you said you liked wine. Oh.
You don't have to be perfect to be a perfect parent. There are thousands of teens in foster care who would love to put up with you.
Welcome back to Mental Health First Aid. We're talking about NAMI, and we have Mary Dalton here from DuPage NAMI, and we're going to discuss a little bit more about the educational programs they do, and an educational program we did specifically for your board members. You have quite a few board members.
That was great, yeah. With our partnership with Mental Health First Aid, our executive director wanted our board of directors to take the Mental Health First Aid course. So our staff and our board, we all took volunteer. We took the Mental Health First Aid, and then we also
12-hour class they committed to.
12-hour class.
Yeah.
And then we also have had a class for some of our volunteers.
It was really interesting. I was at that class and helping out and stuff, and hearing the board members, it was able to give me a flavor of what NAMI was all about, what was happening. And just during our classes, you know, you talk about different things that are happening, and they have questions for us. Charla Waxman was also the teacher with that, with you, Mary, and it had to be tough teaching your own. I mean,
that was tough. That was the first one I had taught, having the board of directors in front of me.
Teaching your bosses.
Yeah, teaching my bosses was a little nerve-wracking.
But you did a great job. It was really interesting, but it was really interesting to hear their responses and their talk and what they've learned and what they brought to the table too, you know, about information and stuff, and with family members having this or having that, and the good and the bad, what's worked and what hasn't worked.
Exactly.
You know, and that is the kind of things that you can bring for other people who are just entering the field. You know, you can give them so much of that wisdom.
Right.
And I think that's what's really helpful. You mentioned one of your classes that you have, and what was that called?
Family to Family.
And
that's kind of a signature class for NAMI. That was probably the first class that they came up with, and that is the 12-week, 2.5 hours a night.
Right. It's a commitment, but well worth.
It's a huge commitment, but literally it changes people's lives.
Right.
It helps them to understand their family member who has an illness, and then it helps them to know how to take care of themselves as well. And we find that once the families are educated on what's going on and they realize that this is not a choice, this is a biological brain disorder that their family member is dealing with. It's just like any other illness. It's like, it can be like diabetes, it can be like cancer, it's anything else. Just because the symptoms sometimes are behavioral, sometimes people think it's a choice.
Well, sometimes when you can put a title on it, it helps too, just to understand, you know, and then to get the stigma away from that.
Right.
You know, that just say, hey, this is just something you're going through, that's something you got to work on.
This is a physical illness. It's, your brain can get sick just like any other organ of your body.
Right. So that was one program. What was the other ones?
Our other one other one we have is called NAMI Basics. It's kind of like Family to Family, but it's for parents of children and adolescents who have some kind of symptoms of a mental diagnosis, or who maybe have been diagnosed actually. So it's for parents of children who are still in the schools, and that's a 6-week course, so it's a little shorter, and it's specific to children and adolescents of that age, and then it talks about the school system, how to navigate the school system for your child. So if there's an IEP, maybe it teaches them how to work with the school to get their child the help that they need.
So it empowers them, really.
Very much so. I mean, parents and family members come out of these classes just raring to go. You know, they are ready to advocate.
Understanding it.
They're understanding it. They've got it now, and they want to help, and they want to advocate for their child or their family member. And so NAMI Basics is wonderful in that respect, because I think many times parents, you know, their child is having these problems, they're trying to work with the school. Sometimes the school, you know, because it may cost them some money, doesn't necessarily want to give them as many services as they feel that they need. And it can be very intimidating for the parents. But when they come out of NAMI Basics, they've got their information, in, and they're ready to go.
Know what to do and where to go,
Yeah,
how to handle things.
exactly.
I can see we talked earlier in the session about the money situation, that you're not government funded, you're just on your own. Health insurance doesn't help with these things.
No.
I mean, you're just on your own. You got to come up with your own funds for this through grants and other things. But you can see where that cycle of help,
Yeah.
if it would be so passionate to them where they got the help, you're willing to give some money back to keep it going.
Our very best volunteers, a lot of our board members, as you saw, and probably our biggest and most faithful donors are people who have gone through our classes, who are family members, you know, who have gotten the help they need.
Right.
And the people who lead our classes or our support groups are invariably people who have gone through the programs themselves, found so much help for themselves, and want to then pass it on.
Right,
Yeah.
and don't want to make sure it doesn't go away. We need it, and it's very important to have it. But it sort of comes right back from the grassroots of where it came from.
Exactly.
You know, two mothers come together and they want to find out what's going on and help, can understand exactly what's going on.
Exactly. And once you've found the help for yourself, you want to pass it on to somebody else. You don't want to see them struggle.
You say there is some type of mission statement that you have? Or?
Well, NAMI DuPage's mission, and I think probably most of them are pretty similar, is support, education, and advocacy to improve the lives of individuals with mental health diagnoses and their families. So it's two-pronged. It's three-pronged: support, education, and advocacy for both the family and the individual themselves.
So we had two programs we talked about.
Yeah,
and
there's
you have
one more. There's one more. Some NAMIs offer it, some don't. It's called peer-to-peer. And it is for the individual themselves who has the diagnosis. And it's two individuals who have a diagnosis, who have been trained through the state, and who are living very well in recovery. And they facilitate, I believe it's a 6-week class, and they teach the peers, their peers, how to live well in recovery. What
When you
steps
said
to
trained
take.
through the state, what did you mean by that? There's a
Our state organization, NAMI Illinois,
okay.
has training. So they give training for support group leaders, for education class
So it's a regular
leaders.
instructor class they have to go through?
Yeah, it's a weekend training. So it's a big time commitment, and these people are all volunteers. So they teach these classes over and over again, or they might have a support group every week or every other week. It's a big commitment.
I've mentioned this before in some other shows, but I totally believe this, that if you teach something, it's the ultimate in learning.
Yes.
You really understand it when you
Right.
teach it.
Right.
And that's what
Right.
really helps. Through this
Yeah.
mental health first aid class, we've taught this several times, boy, you learn so much
Oh, yeah.
from this. I mean, and it just, this isn't those people. It's
No.
us.
Right.
It's 1 out of 4 of us that have a
One
mental
out of
health
4.
issue.
I was astounded when I heard that. When I first got into NAMI and I heard it's 1 out of 4 individuals in the United States who have some kind of mental health diagnosis, I was just astounded.
You know what else surprised me with, with the whole thing was that a year before somebody with psychosis will get help. That's got to be just, how much pain is that person in?
Yeah.
And embarrassment and social,
see,
you know, just.
And so many times it's because of the stigma, and nobody wants to try to get help because that means I have a problem, you know, and I don't want people to think there's something wrong with me.
Exactly.
And that's where we really need to just say, hey, you know what? Like I said, brain is an organ in your body. It can get sick, just like your pancreas or your heart or anything else can get sick. And why should there be any shame? There isn't shame in getting help for cancer or for diabetes. There should not be any shame.
Right.
Because treatment works, early treatment works the best, you know,
Absolutely.
early intervention.
The sooner you can get
Just with
the
anything
help, the
else.
better. And then we're
Right.
looking at anxiety, depression, the other ones.
Oh, sure.
Up to 10 years before somebody will get some help.
Yeah.
10 years. That's just a lot of time, a lot of
It's a
energy
lot of
being in it.
time. It's a lot of, you know, kind of heartache. It's a lot of struggle that doesn't
For more
need to
information, we
happen.
can get a hold of on NAMI.
NAMI.org,
Okay.
www.nami.org.
A lot of good information there.
Tons of good information, and you can trust it.
Mary,
yeah.
I appreciate you so much for being on and giving us
Thank
information
you.
on this, and thank you for what you do. Thank you for being with us today and listening, because I hope you got a lot out of this, because there's so much here to give you that you can help yourself with. So thanks a lot for being here, and we'll see you next time on Mental Health First Aid.